Hello, Council Bluffs Area Chamber of Commerce members. This is Drew Kamp, President and CEO of the Council Bluffs Area Chamber of Commerce, here for our March 5th weekly legislative update. This is the week of the first funnel week, and what that means is that a bill in the House has to pass out of the appropriate House committee. The bill in the Senate has to pass out of the appropriate Senate committee if it is still alive for the remainder of session. There are some exemptions, such as leadership bills, ways and means bills, appropriations bills, and administrative rules and things like that. But for the most part, if a bill does not advance out of the respective committee and the respective chamber by today, that bill is dead for the legislative session. It's an important deadline because it really winnows down bills and allows them to set kind of the priorities as they look towards the REC numbers coming up here in a few weeks, the revenue estimating conference numbers that will really allow them to start setting the budget and getting some budget targets out there for some very important pieces of legislation and priorities that we've seen move through the legislature. Kind of looking ahead, one of the big things that we're really watching for is, as I mentioned, that revenue estimating conference that's here in, I believe, a week or two. And that's going to be really important because, as we've heard within our legislative roundtables and other conversations with legislators in our leadership meetings, for example, a week ago Tuesday, is that they really are waiting for those revenue estimating conference numbers on a lot of different major issues because they need to see what those projections are and where those targets are going to be able to be placed at so they can have an idea of what they're going to be able to spend on some of these large scale priorities like broadband, for example. But as we look at some of our priority bills and just what is going on with them right now, I just want to focus on a few of them specifically that had some action this week. With regards to childcare, they are continuing to kind of sit in the Senate. They're priority bills. There's 6 of them that passed out of the House, but we are continuing to try to speak with senators about the fact that this is a workforce issue, not just a social or human services issue. It is both issues, but it's very much a workforce issue because we know that there's been thousands of folks who have left the workforce, especially exacerbated by the COVID pandemic, that have not returned to work because of childcare issues. So that's something we want to make sure that we're addressing, and we want to make sure we're doing it in the right way. And we'll continue to do that as we have conversations with our legislators. There is a bill, as I mentioned last week, on port authorities. And what that really allows us to do is it's very broad in its definitions, but it can allow you to kind of unify in larger groups of whether it's other governmental entities or other tax entities to really form together to do large scale projects, whether it's infrastructure, commerce, economic growth projects. Those are things that port authorities could be used for. We're in support of the bill, and there really is a broad base of support behind it. So it did make it through the funnel, and we will continue to watch that as it goes forward because we think that it could have some positive implications and benefits for our community and others throughout the state. The medical malpractice bill, there was a bill that came out of the Senate and the House both on this issue, so that made it through funnel in both chambers. But it did have a hard time getting out of the House committee and may be difficult to pass the full chamber. That remains to be seen. We knew that this was going to be kind of a contentious issue because it really pits 2 people together, like I've noted with the medical community and the trial lawyers. And one thing that continues to get noted, as you may recall from some of the conversations we've had too, is right now the cap on non-economic damages is $1 million. So there is talk about that may need to be shifted if it's going to move forward. So we'll continue to monitor that and any progress that's being made on that issue as well. Broadband passed out of both the House Information Technology Committee and the Senate Commerce Committee. They really are talking a lot about the policy side of things right now. The appropriations is a different piece for that $150 million potentially that the governor's asking for this year, but that really depends on what we see with the REC numbers, as I noted earlier, in a few weeks. And as we look at the budget targets, we'll have a better idea of what that appropriation may be able to look like. But right now, they're really having conversations concerning broadband on the policy side, largely based on the speeds. So right now, part of Manufacturing 4.0 that's coming out of Director Durham's office at Iowa Economic Development Authority is really calling for 100 up, 100 down. And that's really to make sure that we can meet the needs of our industrial and technology companies throughout the state. And that's an area that we see us moving forward and expanding in into the future. So we continue to push that number and support Debbie and her efforts in that regard. but we will continue to monitor that, especially as we get a better idea of what the appropriation may look like to be able to do something with broadband, because we also heard from Congresswoman Axney this week that the federal government wants to not only include some pieces within the COVID Relief Act, but that'd be a huge piece within any infrastructure bill that the federal government looked at. And we heard that President Biden is actually looking at that as being one of the next issues that he may try to tackle. So we'll continue to watch that and keep you abreast at the both federal and local state level as to what's happening with broadband discussions. There is the bill about the tech censorships that would affect data centers and other tech companies throughout the state. It would actually have very broad implications. It wouldn't necessarily even just be like, obviously, we're really in the fight and backing and supporting Google, and we're opposed to the bill. But it could even have more implications as you look at companies like Wellmark and other ag tech companies that could technically, potentially under the definitions within the bill, that granted there can still be changes made to it, obviously, could potentially be impacted too. So there's a lot of things that need to get talked through. We continue to have conversations about the merits of the bill, and we don't even want it to move forward at all, obviously. But we also are having conversations with, if it is going to move forward, like especially in the Senate, we know it has pretty broad support there, that there are some key changes that are going to need to be made. We did see Senator Chapman talk a little bit about some of the concerns the regions and some school districts and others had brought up about, the impacts of censoring tech companies and what that would do if they use those tech companies as part of their offerings. So that is something he was open to having conversations about and changing. But that bill did move out of the Senate Commerce Committee, and it does have a pretty full head of steam in the Senate. We continue to have conversations in the House as far as the feelings on the proposed bill there as well, and we'll continue to have conversations with leadership and local legislators in that regard. But once again, we're very much against the bill, and we'll continue to fight to not have it move anywhere, but then also at the very least make sure that improvements are made. Finally, the IADA bill, it did pass out of committee and remains alive. It is an appropriations bill, but it's just important to note that it did pass out of the Economic Growth Committee. So that's something we wanted to make sure we noted, because that includes Manufacturing 4.0, but it also includes a variety of changes to tax credit programs that Debbie thinks needs to happen, that Director Durham, at Iowa Economic Development Authority thinks needs to happen to make sure that we're putting ourselves in the right position to provide tax credits and assistance where the demand is. So that's something we continue to be supportive of, and we'll continue to monitor as we are all of those other bills. So with that, that kind of concludes some of the conversations that I wanted to have on some bills specifically that were funnel related to the funnel. But the TIF bill does continue to be alive. That will continue to be a live round because it's a Ways and Means bill and it's exempt, as I noted before. We continue to have a lot of conversations with legislators, specifically in the House, because that's where the bill sits right now. It hasn't come over to the Senate. We're trying to make sure it doesn't make it out of the House. So that's something we'll continue to have conversations with folks throughout the state and us, obviously, locally, with the broad implications that having a bill that would ratchet down perpetual or some of light TIFs and the negative impacts that would have to be able to do large-scale projects and to existing bonding and things along those lines, and also some misunderstandings about the school tax levy. We'll continue to have conversations about that to make sure that we have the best information in the hands of our legislators as they consider that very important bill. With that, that kind of sums up what I wanted to make sure that I covered this week. I thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, please do feel free to reach out to us. We'll continue to work on a lot of these bills. Now that we're out of funnel week, there'll be kind of a more focused approach now as we look towards the REC and kind of looking at the appropriations piece and having a more strategic focus on a lot of different things going forward. So we look forward to having conversations about some of these priority bills that we've highlighted not only this week, but throughout the legislative session as we move towards the targeted adjournment date of April 30th. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for your support of the Council Bluffs Area Chamber of Commerce. I hope you have a very nice weekend.